this, of Hospitality Marketing, live show number 251. Not that it isn't special when you hear Lily and Ben, I'm just saying, Jason is, special people.
It's fair. It's fair so far.
Yeah, we're old faces to everybody, so it doesn't make much of a difference. But we get the Mr. Jason Q. Farid, and as I told Ben, because he first met Jason just now, you've heard of GQ? Meet JQ.
Honestly, it's probably not the worst nickname someone has on this show, if I'm honest.
Hey, listen, when your middle name's Quentin, I just felt like as a byline, as a writer, you got to use it, right? My dad's name is Quentin. His dad's name is Quentin. It's my middle name, so I figure I got to use the Q in my byline.
Got to use the Q, JQ for It's and by the way, just so everyone knows, Jason is the founder and founding partner of a really cool organization that started out of all of this, which is a Hospitality Recovery 2020. And we were just talking through the logistics of what he and his group of motley crew have put together on a daily basis. I mean, we all know what it comes to mean creating daily content. That's an astronomical mountain to climb, let alone start handling clients still and all that kind of stuff. So Jason, as promised, as always, it's a pleasure to have you, and really looking forward to everything you have to talk about. And I'm really going to turn over. So where you want to put a stick in the sand and start chatting?
Well, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me on. I feel like I'm in great company. I know most of the people who are on this show on a weekly basis. So, I am mad at Stephanie for not being here. She told me to give her a shout out. I'm not going to do that. I'm actually mad at her for not being here. So
that's a show rule, by the way. If a host doesn't show up, they're open game for taunting and hey, Mr. Tris.
As you say that, they're all going to start showing up now.
Well, except for Stephanie, she's on the road. She can't say anything. She can't. It's going to be weeks before she gets back to us about what were you saying.
Yeah.
Tris meet Jason. Jason meet Tris. Tris is also over on the other side of the pond.
Nice to meet you.
Equally brilliant as Ben. Not near as good looking, or kind of good looking in a different way with the beard, but
I'm going for the caveman look at the moment. I've had so many conversations with my wife saying, on lockdown, can you cut my hair? And she's done it once in lockdown, and it was the biggest fallout we've ever had. She's now kind of refusing to do it. So I'm faced with either having to buy her gifts and be very nice about no matter what it looks like, or shave it all off myself.
Shave it, mate. Hipster was so 2017.
Right now, it's the whole thing. So,
but it's so warm right now. It's like carrying.
Yeah, if you guys see me and Trace just huffing and going a shade of pink today, it's 23 degrees. All right, which in American temperatures
hot.
Is
no, it's not. It's cold for America.
73.4.
Okay. Oh, that's about perfect.
That's nothing.
Oh, that's perfect. I'm in 90 degree right now. I'm in 90 degree, which is 26, I think, on yours.
Guys, my earlobes are sweating. Like, this is ridiculous. This is not.
Anyone will be the eyelids, Ben.
It will, and you'll think, why is Hanley crying? He's not. It's accumulated. Jace, if honestly you see tears, it's not the presentation, it's not the conversation you're about to give, it's the heat.
I'm just curious, from your guys' side of the pond, what's the situation over there in terms of the lockdown? Are you guys able to go out? Are you able to eat at restaurants yet? Or
great question, Jason. I am glad you asked. First of all, it depends whether you're a member of the government. Because I don't know if you guys caught it over in the US. There was some shenanigans with a guy called Dominic Cummings who decided to drive hundreds of miles. Despite being the guy behind the Thou Shalt Stay at Home, he decided to drive a couple hundred miles to see his parents because he may have had COVID and he needed childcare.
No, his wife had COVID.
My bad. And then he drove 30 miles to test his eyes.
Was it Mary?
To see if he could see properly. I mean, I forget the opticians. I just get in my car and go for a drive. And I feel that's all the medical diagnosis I need for my prescription.
There's no better test of your eyes than getting in a 2-ton machine and driving it really quickly in public.
On the wrong side of the road, I might add. Wrong side of the road.
Ooh, that's a different podcast. That is a different one. 7 ways in which America's wrong. You can call that one.
That would be really good. We could. Pretty quickly too.
He was playing it down. 7 is not the number.
7's always the number.
That's just the number today. From Monday, the Prime Minister has announced that we can meet 6. Right, Tim. Not 7, not 5, 6. but you can't touch each other. God forbid you try and hug someone. You'll be.
But hasn't Scotland just said that they can do 8? So literally 40 miles north of me, I can take 2 extra people.
But you still can't hug them, buddy.
That's
Don't
the
dare
thing.
hug them. Dare.
I'll tell you what, though, they're
It
not.
has nothing to do
treated
with the
properly.
pandemic, man. That's just they're worried about you.
Sorry, go on,
Sorry.
Lily.
What are we saying, Lily?
I was just going to say nobody's really serious about all of this until they look at Michigan's rules, where apparently there's a $500 fine if you're caught out in public without a mask on
Yeah.
Oh wow.
from the government.
That's okay. Come to Florida. We just go out to the beaches and hug each other. It's okay.
Right. Just ignore everything.
Density just means how many people you have to crowd through to get to the bar. It's all right. Jason, sorry. We off-railed you already. Mr. Tim Peter has also joined us, who you know already.
I do. Welcome,
And
Tim.
you're saying, saving the world how? Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think. Well, I guess I asked a question, so that's going to be a lot of what you're going to get from me. I'm a reporter by trade, right? I'm a journalist by trade, so I don't.
Oh, yeah, we're going to have to leave now. Sorry.
And that's probably why you saw me taking notes too. I mean, I might be able to get some content out of this. I'm hoping. So I'm trying to like tag team this here a little bit.
Yeah, British people sweat from the eyeballs. Shocking.
So
The fact
yeah,
that
so
are here,
I
you'll
mean,
get
I guess I'll just start there with a little bit of an intro. Most of you guys know me and a little bit of my background anyway, but I started writing about the hospitality industry around 2007. First publication was Hotel and Motel Management magazine. That was right before the first downturn, or not the first, but the last downturn, the financial downturn. So I started writing heavily about recovery and, how do we rebound from this? So it was kind of a good setup for what I'm doing now, although an unfortunate one. So then I went and worked for Hotel News Now for 3 or 4 years, learned some amazing things about the industry, met a lot of fantastic people there. Obviously, that organization owned by STR, they do a phenomenal job. Was a great place to work. Did a stint at Restaurant Hospitality magazine for a little bit, writing about food. Not sure why I ever came back to hotels after doing that. But got picked up by Duetto around 2014 or 15. Really super smart group of guys doing some really innovative things in the industry around that time, and was super excited to join them and help build out their content marketing program. And, they were really early on that, right? That was 2015. And, they were early on the content marketing thing. They bought in, they wanted a former journalist, somebody that they could trust, that knew the industry, that they didn't sort of have to teach. And I think it was a smart decision for them. We did a killer job over the 5 years there. I'm really proud of all the work we did. Everybody knows the name Duetto now. I think we made a really big splash, not only in content, but events and branding and all the other good stuff. So I had an amazing time working there. I decided to leave earlier this year in January to start CLE Content. You can only write about revenue strategy for so long. And, I wanted to explore other things. I wanted to see what else was out there in hospitality technology specifically, and, who was really pushing the envelope and doing some cutting edge innovation. So that was the plan there, and it started off really well. That was January, February. I went to Digital Marketing Conference in February. I think the HSMAI show. I think a lot of you guys were there and caught up with a lot of you there, and it was fun to be back. And little did we know that a month later the world was going to change, right? And perfect timing to launch my own business. So. Had a good number of clients right off the bat, and then learned a lot from everybody on this call about sort of how to manage that. But as you know, it's a learning experience, and that's what I've been doing over the past 4 months, is having a lot of tough conversations during COVID, but also doing some really good work for some clients and putting out some awesome content and learning some really great things about the industry.
So Ben, Trish, you guys don't know anything about technological stuff or anything, right?
It's all new to me, Lauren. I'm just learning as I go along.
No, I can say I'm still trying to figure out how they get a sun in the room. You know?
Jason,
our
he's joking. We do have electricity over here.
Yeah, Jason, you're gonna have to hook up with Ben and Tris later on. And our South African contingency showed up today. Stuart.
Good
day,
mate. Good day, Stuart.
Good day, mate.
How you doing today, buddy? Everything bonza?
I think I'm here because
You're now miming. He's
You went
miming
mute.
South
You
Africa.
went
This
mute.
is great.
I think he said something about shrimps and barbecues, but I may be wrong.
I hope he was.
Yeah, Jason, you know Stuart, I hope. Yes?
Yeah, we've met maybe over email and at a couple events, but it's great to meet again, Stuart.
He's gonna be the silent partner today.
He's incredibly self-conscious about his voice
He's
now.
screen candy. He's just screen candy. It's okay.
But
So,
no,
Jason,
Lauren,
what are you
yeah,
doing?
it would be great to connect with Jason after this. I think there's some really interesting things already that I'm
Yes, indeed.
currently stalking your LinkedIn, Jason. If I'm
Oh,
entirely honest.
fantastic! Great.
So don't be worried about that. But what a background, mate. Really interested to listen to what you got to say today.
Yeah.
Even being a journalist as well. That's fine.
No. Jason was always known for writing very concise and very to the point articles about things that were often very cluttered, very confusing. I always gave him credit for kind of like being like, what was it, Hammurabi's knot, where you could just cut to the Tim, what is it?
The Gordian knot.
The Gordian knot. Thank you. It's
Alexander
names.
Great.
Bob's not, okay? Bob's not.
Yeah, that is true.
But yeah, just getting to the point and getting to what the actual core issue of it is. Tim has that gift too, although he remembers names much better than I do. So, Jason, is there any particular aspect of what you want to talk about? I mean, you're literally keeping your hand on the pulse of things. So, is there anything that's of particular interest?
Yeah, I mean, Jason, is there any news that we should be aware of?
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, I any and all, really. I love Robert's, newsletter that he puts together every Friday. I read it every Friday. I've been, writing the Hotel Recovery 2020 daily newsletter. I now got 2 people on board to help me write it. And you would know the names. Alicia Hoisington's a longtime hotel editor. Brendan Manley, a longtime hotel editor. So we're kind of dividing it up by day now. So I wrote yesterday's, and then every week I see Roberts, and we're talking about the same thing. So yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of issues going on out there. I mean, the recovery obviously is on everyone's mind first. Who's coming back? When are we going to start seeing demand come back? But there's offshoots from that conversation that I think are more interesting and really interesting. And yesterday we explored whether whether independent hotels are going to be moving to branded, or whether branded hotels are going to be moving independent, because they're having trouble with franchise fees or whatever it may be. And I think I actually credited the guys at Skift. They're doing an amazing job covering that. Skift has a new hospitality editor named Cameron Spence. And I mean, he's really killing it on that front. I mean, I think that's a really interesting topic, and I'm curious to hear what you guys are seeing on that. I mean, the brands are all saying in their earnings reports, right, that we're going to grow by conversions. We're going to grow by grabbing these independents who need sales and marketing support. But now you're seeing organizations like the BLLA really step up and say, no, I mean, you need to remain independent to be a unique property, and you can find sales and marketing support elsewhere.
Yeah, I think what's going to be telling on whether or not the brands can make traction is how their services are being affected by the massive furloughs. Because it's going to be hard to say to a hotel that's not a brand, hey, you'll have a better shake with us, when potentially the brand is not doing what they would normally do, because their services are affected by this lack of team.
Right, when they've asked 2/3 of their team to head for the exits.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
That is certainly going to make servicing new hotels more challenging. Call me crazy.
Crazy.
Hey, is my audio working now?
We can hear you.
No.
Yeah.
No, it's
No,
not. So.
not at all. No.
G'day. Bonza, mate. Shrimp and Barbie.
Did you say koala bear?
No, that would be incorrect statement, wouldn't it?
I would like to add to the fact that we're just getting in the news even recently that Marriott has extended their furlough.
Yep.
That Hyatt has permanently cut 40% of its team. We hear persistently within the organizations that furloughs, not only do they could exist in large percentages, but there is the possibility of future extension. So my question to that is, when hotels are looking for that, I got to come back alive, turn on the lights, get back to business, who are they talking to?
Well, so actually, I want to take one big step back for a second, if I can, and I'm going to pontificate for a moment, and then I want you all to shoot the full hole because I'm going to get a little bit out over my skis, and I fully acknowledge that. But I was asked by a client of mine for, could I do a little bit of research and take a look at, what people are saying and pull some consensus estimates together when we think this is going to be over and the like. What is normal when is normal going to happen, right? And so I've been doing a bunch of research, and I am not an economist. I don't play an economist on TV, so I may be very wrong here. But a mentor of mine told me once long ago, which is when in doubt, assume your average, right? If you really don't know anything, go for the average, right? To play the odds. And there have been 13 recessions since the Great Depression in the United States. This is all U.S. data, by the way. So Tristan and Ben and apparently Stuart, my apologies. And in those 13 depressions, the average recession, lasted for 11 months. The median was 10 months. So depending on which numbers you want to use, you're talking 10 or 11 months. It's about the same. On average, those recessions saw GDP decline of 3.6%. On average, employment rates averaged 8%. So you would assume that if this is going to be average, we're talking 10 to 11 months before we see any recovery. What troubles me about that statement is that we are currently at a 3.5% GDP decline, and we're already double the unemployment numbers, actually well over double the unemployment numbers. So it seems likely that this will not be an average recession, just based on the rough data. We don't know that, but that's a guess.
Well, and I think using your idea of average,
Yeah.
I think what you really need to do is, I don't think that average time period starts until all the government imposed restrictions are fully lifted.
For sure.
Then I think you'll be able to better apply that average rule.
That's right.
Because
By the way, real quick on that, Ed, real quick. By the way, it tends to take the hotel industry twice as long to get to a true baseline level. So there's growth and then there's recovery, right? There's growth is a lot of economists expect to see growth in Q3, and the reason they see growth in Q3, and this is not something that gives me warm fuzzies, is because they expect the decline to be so steep in Q2 that there's nowhere for the numbers to go but up. Mm-hmm. Which, by the way, I don't actually think that's an encouraging statement, because as friends of mine from Germany like to say, it can always get worse.
Your German is fantastic, Tim.
But by the way, I love Germany. Don't get me wrong, but optimism is not necessarily a natural trait we tend to hear from our friends in Germany. But the point here being that just because we see growth does not mean we've made it back to the baseline level by any stretch, and it tends to take twice as long to recover as the decline was. So if we're talking 10 months of decline, you're talking an additional 20 months before we get back to baseline. Doesn't mean there won't be growth along the way. It doesn't mean that individual hotels or individual groups or folks like that cannot benefit during that period. I don't want anybody to hear that there's doom and gloom.
Right.
I do also want to say that this could be something that goes on for quite some time. And the reason I wanted to take this digression, one is because I would love for people to poke holes in my thinking on this. And two, because, when you talk about the Marriott story that they've extended the furloughs and things like that, at least in the US, we have something called the WARN Act, which requires a certain amount of notice to employees if their jobs are going to be impacted, if they're going to be furloughed and the like. So they are likely legally bound to do certain things right now based on what their expectations are for Q3, Q4. So I think this is just a sign that they're saying 3 months from now, we don't expect to be in any better position. And so we have to legally tell you this now because your job may not actually be in place 3 months from now, right? I think that's the WARN Act raising its head as much as it is their assessment of where the economy is going.
So can I give you a caveat? It's not really a whole, but can I point out something that I think
Yeah, please.
very, very, very apparent already in this situation is that, when you're dealing with averages, you're accumulating everything and finding a mean, right? The middle.
Yep.
But the reality is no one really sits at that point. There's a big bell curve and people sit on every point within that bell curve. So I think while you're right, on average, the industry, it may take 11 to 24 months is the projections I'm seeing to get back to where we were. And then obviously we'll see some growth beyond that. For a lot of folks, they're gonna come in a lot earlier or a lot later than that, depending on their unique situation. We're already seeing in beach destinations is over the last couple of weeks that they're doing booming trades. Some of our clients are getting a higher ADR than they were last year and sitting at higher occupancy for the days as they roll by. Now they don't have as much on the books for the next few weeks and months, but the booking pace is 2 or 3 times what it was this time last year.
Yeah.
So
Which means they're digging out.
If I can respond to that
they're
real
digging out of a hole, right? But it's a really big hole. But we got other clients that aren't. They're still shut down because of the restrictions in theirs, and it's going to take longer for those guys. So I think you got to look at your own situation, your own marketing strategy, your own approach. But don't sit there and wait for it. Look for the opportunity now. That would be my advice to everyone. What is your unique opportunity?
I agree 100%. One of the things that does seem to be interesting about this, the Great Recession was very, very unusual, and the 9/11, post 9/11 recession was very unusual for the hospitality industry compared to the norm, right? Normally, the hospitality industry, travel generally, is a very localized thing, right? So it used to be, you look at every other recession before the Great Recession and 9/11, New York could be in recession, but Orlando could be popping, right? Vegas could be in recession, but Anaheim could be popping, right? So, and this does look like it's going to be a normal recession from that perspective, that you're going to see pockets that are growing like crazy. And by the way, I want to be very clear about this. I said, when in doubt, assume your average. That doesn't mean you should make like your average. You should work your ass off to be better than everybody else in your market and better than every other market you're competing against, for sure. So none of that's meant to say, sit back and wait for the ball to come to you. You definitely want to be charging the ball.
Yeah, I mean, and the bottom line with that is,
real quick, there's a comment from Jason that said, from my understanding, China has begun opening up. Why not use that market as an example? I actually do have data from China as well, and it's factored into this. The challenge with the Chinese data is it's tougher to get baselines off of just because of the way they report data.
It is too, and culturally they're so different, right?
Well, but you certainly can learn lessons, to your point, about what can we expect to see from a growth perspective. Absolutely looking at the China data.
Well, yes and no, right? So we talked about this on the show last week, where we were sitting with some properties at 40% occupancy, and we were expecting to see a modest growth over the coming weeks, because that's what we've seen in China. And yet now, because US is the US, and the psychology of people here is very different than that in China. In most other countries, we've seen this crazy, cognitive dissonance going on with people, where they're like, I know I shouldn't be doing this, but screw it, I'm ready to get out, right? And so we've seen this tidal wave of people flooding to every beach that's open across the entire United States. And we saw on the media last week, like the Ozark and places like that, where it's just crazy people just completely pretending like they're back to normal. That didn't happen in China.
I think the other thing with China as well. The other thing with China as well is that they've already been through something similar to this back in 2002. They had SARS. So, whilst it wasn't a mandatory government quarantine or lockdown, from my understanding, most of the shall we say, educated Chinese people decided to self-isolate and wait that whole thing out. So there's been an element of been through this before in that nation. yeah, we're going to have generational differences and people coming through and whatever. Whereas the rest of the world, certainly the Western world, has never been through that type of thing. And there is that element of, my God, when's this going to end? Because we need to go out and have, some kind of local visit staycation. Or Ben, what are we going to call it now?
Either a yearcation instead of revenge travel, because we all hear that. a yearcation, because when people book it, they're going to be going, yay. A praycation, because that's all people have been putting their hands together for the last 10 years. Or, in honor of the Hospitality Digital Marketing Podcast, a greycation.
I like the drivecation in the comment.
At first, I thought you said a year. I thought you said a yearcation.
I did too. I was like a year long.
That's his weird northern accent.
Well, it depends. If unemployment lasts for long enough, then
I'll be on a yearcation.
Regardless of who you are,
right,
where you sit in the bookends. I mean, and let's call out what the bookends are. They're pretty easy to see. You have the fast recovery, which are your nature-based leisure destinations, are on the bleeding edge of recovery. And then you have who's obviously going to...
By the way, to be a little semantic, bleeding edge of growth as opposed to recovery, because they're not getting back to the norm yet.
Right. Good point.
Right.
They're actually, I mean, some of them, and you and I were, you had popped into a call that I was finishing with a group that that is the epitome of that type of destination. And they were telling me that as of last Friday, they had only been back open for 2 weeks. They're only off 2% on the year for reservations.
That's amazing. That's great to hear.
They went from completely shut down to completely overwhelmed, to where they actually had hired a couple of their vendors' employees that were on furlough because they were so overwhelmed. That is the bleeding edge. They are nature. They are, remote destination. There's some perceived separation because of that. We'll call them the bleeding edge. The other side of that is the large, big box, compression dependent hotel, right? In a city center that is dependent on, deep compression of the market due to citywide conventions and things like that. They're going to be the last to recover. No matter who you are in that spectrum, you need to have a ninja mentality of there are people traveling. There are always people traveling. How do I find who has to travel, who wants to travel, who's available to travel, and how do I win them? You need to be thinking that from now until it goes back to, I just have to maintain my share of market. That is not the way you've marketed.
And if you don't mind, I'd love to jump in and ask you a follow-up question to that, because Lauren said I only get...
You're the journalist on the show all the time, by the way.
So
I love it.
No, I mean, Lauren said I only get 30 minutes, so I'm going to take advantage of it.
Oh, actually, you get as long as you want.
All the time you want, buddy.
Yeah.
And actually, this is a little bit helpful for me because, I mean, it was incredibly helpful for me, but I'm going to just be upfront. I'm working on a special report exactly about this topic. And it's, as demand comes in, you talk about being a ninja, go out there and getting as much demand as you can. I think you'll also have to be cognizant of where you're getting that demand from and specifically what channels. And I'm so curious to see, after this kind of pause or reset that the industry has went through, whether we go back to, all of the progress we've made over the past decade about, optimal channel mix and distribution mix and working, smartly with the OTAs. It's hard to say that, though. I mean, it's hard for all of us, not working in a hotel, to say this is what you should be doing when demand is, 20, 30, 40%, and, heads and beds is revenue, is more revenue than zero. So how are hoteliers balancing that? And that's really what I'm trying to figure out, is like, how are we taking a short-term and a long-term approach to capturing the recovering demand?
Lily and I just did a cast yesterday in which we disagree, which is odd. I mean, we normally just like peas in the pod, right? But we have a different perspective on that, on different on how that works as to whether if this is an opportunity to redefine our channels, and or to Lily's point, I would look at the unconstrained demand potential of every channel, but use it through an allocation process to mitigate the control of whether you're running rampant just because of the rate factors or the channel itself. So I don't want to be remiss in our chat dialogue. There's a few points we want to jump over there that people have made comments on. But to answer to your point, Lily, I'll let you take the lead on because you did a great summation that kind of combined both of our perspectives into a nice little, yeah, we can do it this way.
Yeah, for sure. So I think that, first of all, what hoteliers are doing runs the gamut, which is probably why you're having trouble narrowing it down. We've got all over the board. But if they're following the advice of most experts in the industry, then they're keeping their pricing at the same level to their competitive set that it has been in the past. That might mean a $100 decrease in your average bar rate, but it does not mean going from the rate leader in your market to the rate bottom in your market. Like keeping, regardless of how your market moves, keeping your position in the market, I think is really important. And to Lauren's point, kind of our take on it was that you probably want to be open on all shelves for the moment, because from a revenue management perspective, not so much a marketing perspective, because you can see data before people book in a marketing perspective. But when you talk revenue management specifically, we only get data once the booking is completed or the search goes up to a certain point in the booking engine at the very least. And so until you can measure what your unconstrained demand is, it's hard to put in a very good channel strategy. You know, there's a lot of people who really are excited about direct bookings, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I wouldn't take this opportunity to say, hey, we want to pull back from Expedia. In fact, I just saw an article that Expedia is doing some serious cuts to commission over the next 90 days and things like that, which is good news.
It's not all good news.
Yeah.
No, it's not all good news, because they're also requiring to participate in that program. You do things like make sure you've got parity on member rates and the like. They are looking at this as an opportunity to get their claws into revenue that they haven't had their claws in before. So
exactly.
I wouldn't say don't do it. I would say be very clear that you know what you are doing when you.
But we knew they were going to do this, right? They're smart. They're innovative. We knew they were going to do things to jump on this, and I think hoteliers have to be cautious not to do what we did the last two times and just turn over the keys to them and give them all the inventory. I think if we do that, we're going to 2 months from now or 3 months from now, we're going to look back and kick ourselves from doing that. I think they still have to hold strong on driving direct. And to your point, it's market by market, right? I talked to a hotel yesterday who they did turn off the channels for the summer because they're a destination market and they drive a lot direct. But in urban markets or in other markets, it depends on the hotel, to everybody's point, I think.
And really the overarching thing that I always say that I learned early on in my revenue management career was you don't restrict unless you're guaranteed to sell out.
Yeah.
That's it. You don't restrict the channel. You don't put on a 2-night minimum, whatever the case may be. If you don't have solid data predicting a sellout, then you're leaving money on the table by restricting.
Yeah, I would add to that though too that
so important.
The historical methods you've used and the data and the patterns that you've always run your strategy based on no longer apply, and we've seen these crazy shifts in consumer behavior. And if like I said on the show last week, if you have a property that goes from 40% occupied to 95% occupied within a 24-hour period, that's unprecedented. With nothing crazy happening, to change why that would happen.
We've said unprecedented. We all need to take a drink. Yeah.
I mean, this is the new normal, to be fair. So, and we are in it together. I'm going to keep making you drink.
Save lives.
But this is to what Stuart's saying. From a marketing standpoint, and this is where marketers need. This is a wake up. If you go back to blissful kind of just turn everything back on and we'll be good, you're going to waste money and you're not going to get what you need, because this is not a situation where inherent demand exists at a high enough level for you to survive on your old strategies. This is where you need to get creative. You need to look at data sources to understand the front edge of consumer interest, and then you need to be aggressively guerrilla style, getting in front of people and making them want to choose you instead of waiting for them to want to choose your destination and then you are present as an option of your destination. We are all destination marketers now. We all need to be convincing consumers why they want to come here now. And that is the new paradigm or paradigm, if you're Lauren, of hotel marketing until all buckets of consumers are back on the market for travel. Now, the good news is you have less competition for your drive market than you previously did. You're not competing with cruise. You're not competing with a lot of corporate travel needs. So like from a leisure standpoint now, someone who was a corporate traveler who's dying to travel again is up for grabs as a leisure traveler because they're dying to travel again. They're a road warrior who's been off the road for months. That's going to bleed into their personal life. So
you've also got the same with your direct channels as well, because the OTAs have had to step back their marketing. So you've now got huge opportunities. And so just to one of your points there, Ed, of how the world is going to be different. The channels are still going to be the same. You know, we haven't suddenly got a new Google. You know, Google still exists. I'm talking for direct here, obviously. But the way in which the consumer is going to be attracted to through the purchasing funnel is going to be very different. Been speaking with somebody just today. They were saying that they're seeing meta search is one of their best channels. You know, they're live on everything else, and meta search is really, really strong. Now, historically, for an independent hotel, we've had a very strong meta search present, but we've always struggled to get a hotel to buy into it. The barriers to entry in terms of, you know, ARI fees and all of this, it's a really nice to have channel. It can convert really well, but we were finding it was one of the first that was to be dropped, especially in a time like COVID-19. But Google, very interestingly now, they're really promoting their commission model. Now, whether you believe in the commission model or not, or whatever, you know, the downfalls that come from it from a direct channel are fairly evident. But it's going to be, for me, I think it's going to be very interesting to see just how hotels are approaching direct marketing when they come back and those same channels. We might see that commission is a very strong way to introduce people back in because there's no immediate risk. I only pay for what people stay at.
The only thing that I would push back on that, and I've had clients who've done very well throughout this period with advanced reservations. I mean, I want to be clear, you know, even while they were closed, they were getting advanced reservations for November, December, etc. through Meta, through paid search, through OTA. I feel like sometimes I come off as part of the torches and pitchforks crowd with the OTAs. I'm not. They just need to be part of your balanced distribution strategy. Sometimes they're a great way to get a guest you're not going to get any way else. But whether you're talking CPC, whether you're talking cost per acquisition, whether you're talking commission, whether you're talking margin rates, etc., it always comes back to what is the cost of acquiring that customer.
Exactly.
And if you're managing that correctly, turning off search during this period, turning off Meta during this period is actually incredibly short-sighted because you're hurting yourself in terms of rankings and you're hurting yourself in terms of awareness with guests for future reservations. And literally, I've got people who've got revenue on the books that they've been booking as March, April, May into 2021 that, yes, they had to put out a little bit of money to get that reservation, but they've got reservations on the books when we know that their competition does not.
And the cost right now, the cost right now for Meta
actually pay for that reservation, right?
The cost right now for Meta and Google, it's just ridiculous. It's the cheapest it's ever been, but there's just so many hotels that have switched everything off.
Right.
Ben, that's not going to work. You're actually going to have to say, "Can I finish?"
Shut up.
I refuse to do the kind of. Two things on the points Ed and Stuart yourself brought up. One, when Stuart, you mentioned you can't just go back to turning things back on, and Ed, you mentioned about just being happy with your share of getting to a point where you're happy with your share of the market. There's in the short to medium term, there's never going to be a time when marketers are under more scrutiny by their partners at other hotels and ownership groups. You can't just turn a thing back on, and if one channel starts to fail, you think, we'll make it up through here. We'll hit the ROAS goal overall for the month. You are going to be under the microscope, and rightly so, because there's no money, and they're giving you money they don't have to try and get reservations they don't have to fill beds that are now empty but sanitized with no biofilm. And secondly, if you've all heard of the analogy between the wartime CEO and the peacetime CEO, and this is something Tris and I spoke about on our webinar last week with AHOA, in peacetime, when the going was good and you had a peacetime digital marketer who knew how to capitalize on a buoyant market, and there was more demand than it was for supply, that takes one type of strategy. You are now neck deep, I'll be polite, in wartime strategy. Not want to be too dramatic about it, but the peacetime strategies we employed this time last year, even in November, December last year, ain't going to cut it now and in the short term as well. You are going to war, the small W, against COVID and your competition. And if they're not going to war back at you with as much enthusiasm as gusto as you are, you're going to win. And hotels and marketers need to adopt a slightly more aggressive mindset to stay afloat. You're going to find the hotels that are asleep at the wheel, that don't have their eye on the marketing spend, that don't have their eye on new strategies. You can't go into Google Ads and write book direct to save, because you are going to fall into a pit of book direct to save. If I see one more spring into summer savings, I'm going to lose my mind. You can't do the same things. You've got to shift up strategies, or else you're going to crumble.
That's so unique, Ben. Everybody just uniquely.
But also, you need to be thinking creatively. If you're a market that depends on international traveler, and you're sitting there going, well, I'm not going to have international travelers for some time. There are going to be competitors of yours that are frozen because of not knowing what to do with that. Well, I have news for you. There's a yin and yang to that. Because there is no international travel, that means people who live in feeder markets to you, who were going to choose to travel internationally this year, are also not traveling internationally and are up for grabs. You need to educate them on why they should be coming to you. What is the experience that is going to be appealing to them? And so this is that ninja mentality, that guerrilla marketing mentality of breaking down, what did I lose? Okay, I lost this. Well, what does it mean that everyone's lost this? That creates new opportunities. Where are those new opportunities? How do I educate them? How do I acquire them? And I promise you, if you take that mentality as a marketer right now, you will eat your comp set, because even if your comp set has someone else who wants to do that, they may not have an owner who's going to allow them to do that because it's so different, it's so risky. But that is what you should be doing now. Is you should be experimenting. You should be making hypothesis, testing that hypothesis, finding the pocket. You found the pocket of people, pour your budget into it, acquire them, move on to the next pocket, because that is what a lot of markets are going to be feeding off of, are these small pockets of people who were displaced from their previous travel planning because of this situation. How do you make them aware of you? Not how do you just be present because they happen to be thinking creatively as a consumer, looking for options. If you wait till they're looking for their options, you're going to be competing in a much harder competition. If you are on the front line of thinking through what consumers are up for grabs and how do I find them, how do I educate them, and how do I pull them in, you will destroy your comp set.
Can I go and moderator for just a moment? You're so good about this conversation. We're actually ignoring the chats, and we're getting way ahead of some of the comments that are made on some of our previous comments. So I just don't want to lose sight. I appreciate Melissa, Jody, Richard, all adding a lot of stuff to what we're talking about, and we're not adding it into our conversation. So I want to make sure that we don't miss some of this stuff. You know, Melissa's been throwing some stuff out about calling it drivecation. Richard was talking about looking at the regionality plus the size and capacities. There's a lot of comments in there, and I appreciate if all the other audiences take a peek at some of the chat line too, because there's some good dialogue in there. Melissa's referring to some stuff, and also thank you very much, Leah, for going back to Melissa's request about the revenue management portion, the new world, new spectrum kind of thing. I think you're going to be able to help her a tremendous amount with it.
Yeah,
Lauren,
Lauren, Melissa beat Ed to the punch on this in terms of be aware of what your drive markets are and what your feeder markets are. Your feeder markets today may not be what your feeder markets have been previously, and I think that's really worth pointing out. It's what you were saying, Ed, but I think it's really worth emphasizing that point that, you know, just because you know what your feeder markets are, that may not be true right now. You need to be very
You don't know anything right now. It's completely new. I would
And
say,
that's
just,
no with the air quotes on that one.
can I follow up on Ed's point? Because he made the point about if you're typically taking advantage of international travelers, you've got to rethink your mindset. Well, there's a massive opportunity there, because if you look at the net import and export of travel in North America, I'm talking about, we get a lot fewer people travel to the U.S. than people from the U.S. traveling out. There's about 19 million trips delta between the two. So if people aren't going abroad, you've got 19 million additional people than you would have when you take out the people that typically come here. So there's a new market, and it's bigger than your old market. You've just got to go out and hunt for it. Instead of waiting and gathering it, you've got to go out and hunt for it. You've got to become a predator where everyone is looking for the same prey. You've just got to be more ruthless than everyone else.
And you've got to be flexible with it as well, because I think to Ed's point you were saying there, and you're all talking about, you know, these next steps that are coming up. You know, we've no longer got an international market. We're going to look at drive, yaycations, staycations, whatever we're going to call them. But they're not going to be here forever. So you're going to have to pivot and then pivot again. So whatever your strategy is in place, it ain't going to be the same in 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. It's going to be changing constantly. And it's at that ninja and gorilla mentality, to coin Ed's phrase, is not just now, it's going to be for the foreseeable future, in my opinion.
Which is why independent hotels are going to dominate over flags, in my opinion, because they have much more agility and ability.
Yeah, okay.
I agree.
So I want
That's
to provide a little context from the revenue management side as the sole representative on the marketing show of the revenue management side.
I would like to point out my background is actually in revenue management.
Yeah, but it's been so long.
So your background is managers right now.
No. Anyway, but this is why it's so important for marketing and revenue management to work together, because you guys are all strategizing budgets, right? And one of the best ways to decide in which channels you're going to invest your budget is looking historically at which channels are the most profitable for you. Now, in the current situation, you also have to look at, maybe the demand has shifted, but the historical net rate from 2019 by channel, after you take out marketing fees or cost per click or commission or margin or pass-through fees, all these different metrics, when you take those out, you distill it down to rate instead of a percentage of cost, you're going to see a natural which ones are your most valuable channels, because some actually bring in a naturally higher ADR, like Consortia, for example, whereas others might have a really large cost and bring in a low ADR. There's stars and dogs and all these things that you have to look at. But those are the statistics that should drive, outside of the demand for each channel, where you're putting your dollars, because obviously you want to start with the highest investment in the most profitable channel to make sure that that is your bread and butter moving forward, and not just kind of throw your marketing budget at the wall and see what sticks. And I'm not saying any of you are suggesting that, but just to add context for people.
Oh no, really?
Well, and if you're not an analytically strong marketer, if you're more of a creative style marketer, this is where you and your revenue manager can really swap skill sets here, and you can lean on your revenue management team to help you in these measured experiments, because most revenue managers are really good at looking at data and seeing what you can learn from data. So I mean, I agree. Like, this is you should both be like in the nitty gritty together as you're going
It
through
works,
this.
Jason. It works.
So Jason, as our guest host,
I totally agree, and we've been talking about that for a really long time, and I'm just wondering the reality of it now in the current times as we're exiting COVID, and hoteliers are still getting their employees back, and the budgets are limited. What does the marketing department look like today? And what does the revenue department look like today? Are these decisions being made at the property level in most cases, or above property level? I see it being really hard in this next couple months to kind of get this back into practice.
Well, I think that depends based on whether you're talking about independent properties or groups or management companies.
well,
or
management companies are
I can say most of my clients, with one major exception, are independent hotels, and they have a revenue manager and they have a director of marketing or a director of sales and marketing, right? And I can say that they tend, and I'm happy to say this because this is something we try to help them do, they tend to work really well together, right? Another of my very large companies is, very large clients rather, is a management and ownership group. It's a little more complicated than that, but for confidentiality reasons, I'm going to leave it at that. And they have a full marketing team, and they have a full rev management team, and they have a full e-commerce team. So they work, collaboratively. But it's do they work perfectly collaboratively all the time? No. And are there pockets within those teams that work really well together, and pockets within those teams that work less well together? The answer is, of course, there is, as you would find in any large company, right? I know one brand that I can speak to has actually furloughed most of their marketing, but kept most of their rev management.
Oh, wow.
So, and most being an operative word here. So a lot of that just depends on the specifics of the organization and the specifics of where they put their resources.
If I can add to
I want to go back real quick. I just want to go back to Lily's comment for one second, because I think this is really important. I think a place marketers, as a general rule in this industry, have done poorly historically. And I think they've gotten better in the last bunch of years. But, I've told the story on the show previously about during 2008, 2009, I worked for the leading hotel in the world, and Ted Tang, who was the CEO, came to me one day and said, we need to cut costs dramatically. You guys are spending a lot of money on marketing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We need to cut costs there. And because we were always a very numbers focused group, we were able to point to, Ted, this is where every dollar goes, and this is how many dollars every single one of those dollars brings back. And if we stop spending those dollars, our revenues get worse, and our profitability gets worse, and our profitability for our hotels gets worse. So this is a time, if you haven't done it previously, you got to know your numbers. You have to, whether you know them or whether you partner so closely with rev management that they help you know them, doesn't matter. But you have to know your numbers, because where we've done badly is, historically, you have a downturn, the CEO or the GM or somebody goes to the head of sales and says, I need you to cut costs by 10%. And the head of sales says, well, if we do that, this is what happens to revenue. And the CEO says, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. And then they walk across the hall to marketing and say, I need you to cut your costs by 25%. And if you don't know your numbers, your response to that is, I guess I have to. Right? That's a real.
The only caveat I would add, Tim, is you really can't base your numbers on historical, right, or what's happening.
Well, at the moment you can. That's right. That's right.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be more forward-looking, I think, and it's going to be more competitive set-based, as everybody has said, right? Like you compare how you're doing to the market.
But I will say, even though your historicals aren't valid, you can at least use historicals to understand what have been your more profitable channels, and then present a plan on how you're going to test the validity of that data. So we want to run controlled tests for the upcoming weeks where we deploy this much to these different ideas, and then we will report back which ones are the most profitable, so then we can approve putting more fuel into that fire. I mean, this is, first of all, it's how you should always be as a marketer, is nothing you've ever done is set in stone. You should always be testing your different options, and you should always be measuring them and then adjusting where you spend. The best marketers who do that look like it's the easiest thing in the world. It's because they realize the brush is never put down. You're constantly painting and you're constantly changing where you move and how you move. It's fluid. And so, yes, I agree. You shouldn't be blindly going on historicals and deploying capital that way. You should be using your historical as a starting point and then deploying tests to then decide what's the new mix of deploying capital to be the most efficient.
I'd like to add one thing with Jason's comment. I'd like to add in one thing, if I could.
Yeah, please.
The idea that out of all these quarantinis that I go on, all these group conversations that are all over the place, I am surprised, and it is an affirmation on all of them, that a lot of ownerships are stutter stopping. They're getting caught in their own paradox, where there's usually three questions asked: how much does it cost? How much do we make? And who else is doing it? That who else is doing it is killing them right now. Because I've talked to a lot of hotel ownership groups that were like, we're opening June 1st. Well, wait a minute. We're the only ones. Well, hold on. Who else is opening? What? June 10th, you said? Oh, well, we're going to wait until June 10th then. Nobody wants to be first out of the gate. And I'm sitting there going, y'all are just, thank you, because I'm just going to keep eating your lunch. Because I am taking all your business right now because you're not in the market. It's not reopening. And this goes back to what Lillian and I were on. It's pre-opening. What are you doing now? And your pre-opening isn't about putting your sanitation product in your hotel. That's operations. That's logistics. That's a necessary component of the future. The pre-opening is put your sales team on the phones again. Start rebooking the stuff that's calling you that nobody's answering the phone for right now, putting them back on the books. It's getting your marketing out there to remind people that you exist in market at a really super cheap rate we just talked about. So you can get out there with the meta search and the keywords that you never would pay for in your lifetime. And that's the pre-opening aspect. And all these other hotels are looking at each other. No, you go first. No, you go first. You go first. And fine, y'all stay there. We're good.
And just to clarify, Lauren is talking about super cheap rates on marketing spend. Please do not put out super cheap rates for
No,
that.
Clear on that. Do not discount.
Oh, and listen,
Just
we
in case
can
anybody
give
missed
you examples of why you shouldn't do that. Look at the areas that have reopened and how quickly demand swept in.
Yeah.
So if you are thinking that your initial is to come out low, so that way you capture a lot, you're going to hurt yourself.
Oh my God.
And you need every dollar you can get. So you're better off missing a demand figure when you're first reopening than you are, selling out at a super low rate and then going, crap.
Especially when you start talking about the additional cost of operations now, and the amount of cleaning that you're going to have to do, the amount of new procedures, new check-in procedures, new operating procedures, closing rooms for 24 hours in between. The profitability numbers are already getting crushed, right?
And by the way, by that point that you're making, anyone who's watching that's interested in understanding what you can do from a cleaning perspective, we had a great episode a couple of weeks ago where we had a remediation company, a company that specializes in cleaning up giant horrible messes, came in to talk about really what's involved in cleaning versus sanitizing. And someone had made a comment here asking, how do the independent hotels compete with these like certified clean things? This is actually where you can go to a remediation company and have them educate you on the different cleanings and actually have them certify that you've done the correct testings and things like that. And we covered that a couple of weeks ago.
Wait, Ed, I'm so curious. Did you get into the electromagnetic sprayers to sanitize rooms?
Oh yeah,
You went through all the day.
You guys went deep.
And not to make you think this is going to be boring, you'll also get to watch all the grown adults that were on this show giggle every
poop.
time he said the word poop. But yeah, it was really good. And actually, this is a company I've worked with multiple times on some mold remediation projects. And they had actually told me that they were doing a lot of contracts for hotels. And what's interesting is the model they're taking for testing. They're actually offering free testing for you in exchange for you just agreeing that if you have a flood or something like that, you'll use them to clean up the flood, which is that's that's an amazing deal. But he actually broke down what it takes, what's involved in it. And by the way, it's not super technical. I mean, it really comes down to do your normal cleaning. That takes care of 90%. Then you just need to put a disinfectant on it and let it sit for 10 minutes. And that generally takes care of the rest. It doesn't take crazy UV lights and all this other stuff. I mean, it literally is just slightly one more step further than your current cleaning regimen can get you there. And you can actually bring in a company like Recromax, who was the one who came in to do spot testing, give you certification that they did that. And, you know, it's not going to cost you an arm and a leg to get there. So if I was an independent hotel, I'd be partnering with a company like that, and I would be marketing that we are certified by an independent remediation company that is licensed and, you know, all of this. And then that kills this thing, you know, and this is really where everyone's mentality on how the brands are going to win here is because of the marketing of this certification and all of this stuff. No, it's not. You can do it as an independent hotel. And actually you can do it with what feels like more legitimacy, because the brand's version of the clean is the brand's own created version, where you can actually go to an independent third party and get a certification that you can market. So, and you can do that for very little cost.
I think communicating it to your guests is incredibly critical. Like you said, the marketing angle of it. I talked to a number of people who are doing it through video. I think that's the best way to do it. I saw an awesome one by Drury Hotels today. If you guys haven't seen theirs, I mean, it's very, I don't think I could be wrong, but I don't think they partnered with Clorox or anybody. They just kind of said, this is what we're doing. This is how we do it. And I think that's going to go a long way. I think you got to get that message on all your booking channels, on all your touch points. I think that hotels that have that and are making their guests feel comfortable in booking their rooms and coming back in will win out over the ones who aren't.
But I will say, and I will caution you, and we talked about this on that show, is only actively market it as a primary thing for a short period of time, then make it easily discoverable from that point forward. Because if you overdo the push of that messaging, it will hurt you. Because there's a lot of people that don't care, but if you keep reminding them of it, you're telling them there's a problem they should care about.
Yeah.
So you should clearly communicate it, push it for a very short period of time, and then make it easily discoverable so anyone who cares can go find it, and anyone who doesn't care can just move forward with their reservation without feeling like there's an issue that they should care about.
Hey, I've got to jump off, guys. This has been an awesome conversation. But before I do want to say this is no slight on the remediation company we had come on, but they did try to clean up the show and failed miserably. I don't think
you've been watching that, but you've been dark.
And for the record, sorry, I've been watching.
You've been Darth Stewie for a while. We've had a whole off the rails conversation about Darth Stewie.
About the voice. Sorry. Well, I also wanted to say when Ed said about them, they had him out for mold cleanup. We all know that that's the dead bodies that are in his basement. So.
Cleaning out the bones in his closet. Yeah, there's Stewie.
Yeah. Tim has Stewie. I brought Brian to the table. So.
All right, guys. It's been a pleasure. Check us out. PhilTravel.com. See you guys.
Bombs are
So I just want to jump back, guys, real quick to a comment that may have gotten lost in all of the Star Wars talk here. But Melissa pointed out something very true, which is that empty beds make no revenue. But I'd like to add two other truths to that, just for context. One is empty beds cost you money when your hotel is operational. They don't just sit there and net zero. They actually cost you money. Mm-hmm. Because there's a certain amount that you have to pay to operate your hotel, right? And the second truth is that just because they cost you money and make no revenue does not necessarily mean that you should discount past a certain point just to get heads in beds, because there is also such a thing as revenuing yourself out of business. You can create a huge amount of unprofitable revenue and dig yourself further and further into a hole that you can't get out of. So make the smart decisions, know what your CPOR is, know what your daily nut is. I know a great podcast that tells you how to calculate that. over on
Is there a revenue? No, no.
Lily, Lily, can I ask you a follow-up?
Lily, what is the name of the podcast? Don't hesitate. What is the name of that podcast?
the
Oh,
Think
sure.
Up Hospitality Revenue Podcast, which you can find at thinkupenterprises.com, episode 1.
It's like-
Lily, I just want to add real quick, because since we're doing the selfless, the shameless self-promotion side of this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. We call it the race you can't win, right? The best way to win it is don't run it.
Yep.
There is always a moron who is willing to undercut your price. Don't compete with a moron, right?
So, Lily, can I ask you a follow-up question? That because obviously, we're saying maintain your rates, don't drop them. I totally get that. I understand it, and I'm not a revenue manager here, as will clearly be shown. Definitely more on the digital marketing side for me. But you mentioned earlier on about a couple of episodes ago. We mentioned how we're anticipating there's going to be a huge flood of people wanting to get the hell out of the house and go and stay. And then we might see a drop and we're going to see what a new normal is going to be. And that's where a lot of the real fight is going to be. When that market disappears,
Right.
that's when we're going to have to start fighting for share. What would a revenue strategy be during that period? Because right now, when you're opening up and expecting 40% occupancy and you're getting 95 and 100, happy days. But what happens when it drops?
I think it's just really important. You can do promotions, don't get me wrong, but they should be promotions. You shouldn't just mark down your bar by $50. Bar, psychologically, when it comes to pricing, bar is what they call your reference point. It's the point against which your customer measures if anything else has value. So if you lower bar instead of putting out, let's say, a LTO, limited time offer, then you're decreasing the value of your hotel. Even if you don't expect people to book bar, which I'm definitely a proponent of a sensical bar because you actually want people to book it. But in scenarios like this, sometimes it's best to keep bar at a level where it makes sense against the market, assuming that your comp set hasn't dropped below profitable bar levels for you. Again, you should maintain your rate positioning, not necessarily the same rate you had last year, but your positioning within your comp set. And then if you need to do something else, properly fenced promos that require an ID, like a AAA, that require some sort of a pre-purchase, if you can get away with that at that period. I know there's some logistics around that, but we actually have lots of hotels that are still booking traditional advance purchase because they've left it open. And surprisingly, they seem fine with it. But I think that it's really important that you make a smart strategy around whatever we discover in that period, because I think that valley is probably the biggest question mark for most experts right now. We kind of know about the surge of demand. We know that's going to be leisure. We know corporate might trickle back, but that's honestly, even corporate transit is a pretty big question mark for us and probably will define a lot of that valley period. And we know that major conventions are probably not coming back for a couple of years. So it's that in between where we're really going to have to all sense out what's shifting in our market. Has our market segmentation changed in terms of what people are looking to buy? And how do we best position ourselves for that market? So to your point, definitely promotions, but just don't be the hotel that, signs a contract with Groupon and puts out a Groupon every month, because that becomes your new reference price when it's so evergreen.
Well, and as we all know, Groupon is not where you acquire customers that will ever come back.
That's exactly right.
The only time Groupon customers will come and stay with you again is the next time you run a Groupon.
And I want to say two things in addition to what Lily just said. First of all, Lily, I agree completely and utterly with everything you said. Completely and utterly. I would add to that. There is lots of data that backs this up. That both, stuff I've seen with my own clients. We focus on, profitability and revenue strategy for hotels. It's not just marketing. It's all about how do you actually bring in the most profitable business to your hotel, right? And we've seen this with our own clients, and Cornell has done research around this, and other folks have done research around this, that when you cut rates past a certain point, your ability to pull them back to where they were after the recovery takes years. This is not something that you're giving away for a short term. You are giving this away for a long time to come. So that's the first one. The second thing is when we're talking about limited time offers and the like, I completely agree. I would also say, also think in terms of value adds. You can include other things, whether it's a resort credit, whether it's a restaurant credit, whether it's a spa credit, etc., where you are lowering your rate, you're providing more value to the guest, but you're actually maintaining that psychological, rate level that says if this is a $400 or a $500 a night hotel, you're still charging $400 or $500 a night. They may be getting more for that $400 or $500 a night, or whatever. If you're a $100 a night hotel, $189 a night hotel, whatever it happens to be, but you're not lowering your rates. You're simply providing additional value. It also makes it much tougher for guests, tougher in a good way for you, and tougher for guests in a good way for you to compare you to the competition, where they're not pulling it apart and saying, well, this is $99 a night. This is $98 a night. Let me go with the $98 a night. This is $99 a night. This is $99 a night. But this one, I also get a restaurant credit, or I also get a spa credit, or I also get, 3 for 2, or however you put that together in a way that actually makes you a more attractive offer while maintaining a rate level. And that's how you actually do really well in these scenarios. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say yes, and there are a certain demographic of people who will only look at price.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely.
I think it's because this is something that actually came out in the fuel travel sentiment study that we talked about last week. The likelihood of a value add incentivizing somebody to travel was unfortunately very low, because I'm a huge fan of value add. So I am not disagreeing with you at all. But I will say that you have to test everything, make sure what speaks most to your own demographic, because especially if you're in the economy or the limited service segment, it may be more of a price play for you, but you have to still do it smartly.
So don't forget, I grew up with Super 8 and Night City.
Absolutely.
And we discovered there are 4 attributes that we always looked at. And we kind of put it into a Venn diagram. We called it the P's and Q's, right? It's price, it's proximity, it is quality, and it is qualities, and we're cheating there by making amenities qualities. And every guest is balancing those 4 pieces against the needs of their particular stay, the needs of their particular trip. There are going to be people for whom price is the only bubble that matters, and then there are going to be other folks for whom that other 3 come into play in varying degrees. So you have to figure out which customers are our most profitable customers, which customers fill enough rooms that we are profitable as a whole, and then understand how much emphasis are we putting on each of those 4 buckets.
By the way, I just want to quickly say Melissa has hit her quota for comments. So Melissa, you're going to have to join the show.
Yes.
Because you're contributing lots of good stuff.
It just works out that way. But yeah, Tris, go ahead. I want to address your original question.
Yeah. But just super quickly to Tim's point there, I think you're right with the P's and Q's. You're obviously right with the P's and Q's. There's now an interesting new factor, and I wonder how you're going to squeeze this one in, because you've got the cleanliness standard that is now become potentially a 5th.
Yeah. It's quality and qualities is how I would think about that. Right?
In these early stages, it's going to be its own 5th, because that's going to have a very, very important point in the decision-making process.
I would almost call that like the 0 factor, right? People are always motivated by trust, right? And think Maslow's hierarchy, right? There's safety and security as a baseline, and if they don't have safety and security, we're not going to trade that for a really good rate. In most cases, yes, you're going to have the weird outlier who's like, well, this is $99, but I might get rolled in a ditch. I don't like that. Oh, but this one's $49 and I might get rolled in a ditch. Okay, for the $50, I'll take my life in my hands. But they're not going to be the norm by any stretch.
Now, let me go back to Tristan's. I want to go to Tristan's thing, but just say that Lily and I disagree on the curve. Just so you know, Lily looks at it as a peak and then a drop. I do not look at it the same way.
Yeah, I don't agree with that either.
I don't agree either. But
huh?
Oh, we agree with.
But I do want to just point out, wrapping up the conversation around Tristan's question and Tim's comments, that when it comes to, I'm obviously speaking from a revenue management capacity, but we mentioned this a little bit on the Navis webinar yesterday as well that I did with Lauren and Kathleen Cullen. And if you didn't get there, you should actually watch that recording. It was pretty great, if I do say so myself.
Three of the best people in the industry right there, by the way. I've known Kathleen for 30 years.
She is sharp. She is sharp, man. She is sharp.
Yeah.
But I would say that you need to actually have marketing that's about your property, because most of the marketing that I've seen in the past year before this has been marketing a price point instead of marketing a feature or a value. And so don't be that person who's trying to market prices. That's the revenue manager's job, right? We go out with the prices. We'll let you know what's profitable and all of that. You've got to market the value.
That's
The
right.
price point shouldn't be the driver in any marketing materials.
Right. Yeah.
Well,
And
and that's actually how you can move and stay competitive with a $3 to $5 difference. Like
Right.
our $5 is a super high value. Paying $5 more for us gets you a way better stay. If you can sell that psychology and make it look like the cheaper hotel is a ripoff and your pricing is like a huge value, that's really that's where revenue management and marketing, can really
And
make a huge
at that point,
difference.
I can add to
I've seen as much of a $50 difference work with
Oh yeah.
for marketing
Tim's
campaigns.
comment, one other thing, and this even goes to brand or a hotel that doesn't have food and beverage, is now is the opportunity to reach out to your local businesses. We've had this on the show before. And if you can create relationships with restaurants, because part of the aspect too that we're doing with all of our hotels is getting a list of what's open around. We learned from what Stuart said about having to Myrtle Beach, where people showed up and half the restaurants were closed, most of the pools wouldn't open. You could do stuff. You're just sitting around a parking lot getting drunk and beating people up. So with that being said, if you can find a list of restaurants around you and things that are open and include that into your dialogue and reach out to them and say, hey, we'd like to share that you're available. And also, what can you give us that we can let the guests know they can use with you? That could be your value add without you having to actually offer it yourself. You can literally say, hey, look, I got discounts in all the restaurants that are open around us, the retail, whatever it is, and reinstitute those local relationships as well. I mean, that's kind of the hunter mentality.
They're in the same boat you are right now. They need
Right.
help too. So this is a perfect time to bundle those offerings together and work really closely with the folks in your own backyard.
Yeah, and it's restaurants, it's attractions, it's all
is.
these things. And listen, I mean, we work with a major attraction on International Drive in Orlando, and when we were reviewing their reopening strategy with them, they told us about this package that they were running, which is an amazing package. And I immediately asked them, I said, "Are you partnered with any of the other hotels on iDrive for them to present this? Because this would be the reason to come and spend a weekend on iDrive even before the theme parks open." And they're like, "No, we'd be interested in that." They are now marketing that package through every hotel on iDrive that we work with because it was such a good value. And it's the reason. The two things combined created the reason to come. It helped the hotels, it helped the venue. These are, and this is what I'm talking about when I'm saying be a ninja, be guerrilla type. Like, you need to be creative. The more creative you are, the better you will be at taking more than your fair share of the market on its standard demand. Ben,
Jason, you were trying to get in there earlier, or Jatris, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Ben.
Before you ask your question, Ben, I really do need to ask Lauren a question around his whereabouts on the weekend of the 16th to the 17th, because there's several unsolved assaults in Myrtle Beach.
Well, it all started with a bottle of vodka, and after that, I just woke up with a tutu on and a strange little.
That's a big
visual we will all live with for the rest of our lives.
Ben, my apologies. I had to get that in.
I was thinking Ace Ventura, Pet Detective type.
I was kind of going that
look.
way.
Okay, first of all, Lauren, given your size, I imagine a bottle of vodka is what you brush your teeth with. I can't imagine it touches the size of the
Oh, Dave, you didn't start in the morning. But okay.
Three things really, and I try not to say anything just to sound intelligent, because it often backfires, especially on a live webinar. Shout out to Lily's podcast. I listened to 2 episodes of it. A fantastic one with Andrea Shillington about branding and how it works with hotels. A quick soundbite from that was when Andrea said, "Values are what you do when nobody's looking." It was that kind of podcast, very, very really good discussion, really good advice, really interesting to hear. And I've listened to 2 episodes, Lily, and both of them have been really good. The other one was about how sales and marketing and revenue should work together because, and then it was 45 minutes of what could go wrong if you don't. By the end of it, I was not comfortable at all. And I don't want to play any part in the downfall of that. So thank you for that.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
No, it was very valuable. Secondly, confirming that Tris and I are entirely in sync. I've written down here, rate drops after the fizz. So if you didn't ask the question till earlier, I was going to ask it too. This whole, the greycations that are happening now, people are going to the destinations, people are going to beaches and having all their fun, and we're hitting high occupancies and we're achieving the ADRs that we would have had possibly last year. What happens moving forward? What happens when that bubble, when everyone's got it out of their system? If hotels, after that first splurge has happened, maintain their rates and don't drop them, how long should they maintain them for? Would they end up playing chicken with occupancy? Has the travel been travelled? Have people got out of their system? And hotels are going to need to react quickly to that. And the third thing, and this is an entirely pivot here and want to talk about something hospitality, digital marketing related, if you'll indulge me. Melissa, 165840. I'm shocked that in the chat, I'm shocked that most hotels do not respond appropriately to reviews. Do not rely on your OTAs, your social media needs to be on point, guest reviews, etc., etc. This is something that Tris and I mentioned last week as well. This is something that we have mentioned for the last 5 years to anybody that will listen. The power of reviews, and a lot of the research we did was around TripAdvisor. And Tris did a fantastic piece of research a couple of years ago where he tracked the average rating on the first page of a hotel's TripAdvisor reviews and the revenue that was booked that day. And as the average rating went up, the revenue booked that day went up. And we overlaid the 2 graphs and you could see they went up and down, up and down. It was almost mirrored. If reviews for hotels are important then, moving forward into post-COVID, they're going to be pivotal. If you imagine the damage that one review to a restaurant would do, I ate the calzone, I got food poisoning. That restaurant has an uphill battle now. If you imagine what's going to happen if somebody says, I stayed at Hotel X and I caught COVID, how does a hotel respond to that? How can you respond to that? The hotels are going to have to make reviewing reviews and responding to reviews part of the daily checklist. Somebody's going to have to be specifically tasked with that, which is a bit difficult because a lot of people are still going to be furloughed. But I think they need to have a response in place for when that inevitably happens. All it takes is one disgruntled guest to think, you didn't upgrade me and my fiance to the honeymoon suite, have a little bit of COVID on TripAdvisor. And how does the hotel respond to that? How do you mitigate the damage that's going to do?
Are you asking this as an open discussion, or were you asking Lily specifically?
Yeah, because we're all paused waiting to know.
Everybody.
So
Everybody.
It's interesting because it kind of ties into the number one story that Robert sent us on the weekly news list, which is some of the backlash against the potential political censure of social media and how that could result in businesses being able to sue different review sites over bad reviews. And while I don't think that that's necessarily playing nice as long as they follow their rules and remove things that are obviously untrue, I do think that it's something that people should be looking out for. And to Melissa's point, responding to everything so that you're keeping an eye on what is coming through and that you can mitigate it. And definitely, even if it's untrue, do not pick a fight in your response. Whatever you do not shift blame or anything like that, because the guest is only going to be able to interpret what you've said as defensive and probably untrue, even if it is true. So you have to be very careful how you word those responses.
Right, and here's the thing to keep in mind, and I would make sure that there's an air of this in how you approach responding to something like that. Is, getting COVID is not the same as having bed bugs, which bed bugs you generally get from contact with the bed. and is easily traceable. COVID is not. And so, there is contact tracing that is done. And so I think showing concern to it being brought up that I went and stayed at this hotel and I now have COVID, if that's literally what's being written, my response would have something exploring the please contact us immediately. We'd like to know from the contact tracing that was done, specifically where in our hotel you had your contact tracing identified as this, so we can notify others and make sure there's safety. And that will immediately at least show that you're caring. It will also be creating a sub kind of discussion of, well, I didn't do contact tracing. I didn't, this wasn't from the CDC saying that I got this from your hotel. This is just me saying that, which then that response of them, they didn't get contact tracing done, all of that, you should be able to submit that to the review site and say, hey, this review went up. We showed immediate concern. Here's all our communications that we did. And they admitted that they didn't do professional contact tracing. That means they cannot say it came from our hotel. They easily could have gotten it anywhere else. So this way you're having that ugly conversation with the person managing the site, not with the consumer, who may not be trying to troll you in your example. They may truly believe that,
there's two versions,
right?
Of that,
So I think showing concern publicly, asking them to contact you so you can talk through the contact tracing that was done, so that way you can make sure everyone who potentially was involved in this is safe and has done the right precautions. Then having that conversation offline, getting a record that they did not do contact tracing, because they didn't, because you wouldn't be hearing from them on a review site, you'd be hearing from the CDC. Okay.
Right.
Then taking that communication, sending it to the review site and saying, this person did not do correct contact tracing. We ask that this review be removed.
The other thing to be aware is that anytime you're responding to a review, and I just posted a link to some research that Cornell did a few years back that showed, revenue gains of 5 to 11% for every point of increase in ratings across various sites. And we see this all the time with clients. But the person you are replying to is not the audience for your response. It is all the people who read the reviews is the audience for your response. So even if the person is a jerk, even if the person is, a total unit, right? You can absolutely, you want to be kind to them. You want to be responsive to them. You want to be positive to them, because they're not the people you're talking to. You're talking to the folks who read those reviews.
You're putting on a show for your future.
You're putting on a show. Right.
Yeah. And if I can add,
the last thing you want to do is say, no, I don't think you got COVID here. And when you tried to our staff, you did it wrong and blah, blah. It's like, out.
No, I'd like to say that there's lesser severities to this. We're going to be dealing with a lot more of the expose videos. Look, Hilton says that they're following safety brands, and look at these people not wearing masks. Look at these people without tape on the doors. Whatever it is, you're going to see a lot lesser, vigilante. Look at this stuff. It isn't what they said it is. These people aren't even doing this. That's the stuff that is probably more eroding in the sense of people's usage of it than somebody bursting up, because just like we look at reviews now, there's extremisms as whenever you look at TripAdvisor, any platforms, you look at whoever says this is the worst place since it was ever created, are usually people that are competing with it. People says the greatest thing since sliced bread are the people that work at it. And somewhere in the middle, there's a consistency of comments that are like, yeah, the toilets are small, whatever. But there is this happy medium. So these eroding comments probably are going to be more invasive to conversation of people's expectations of reviews and so forth as to the standards, which goes back to something, Jason, you had mentioned about these videos. And we've recommended to our clients that it's being pervasive, where this is a chance even for branded hotels to stand out uniquely, saying, I know we're a Hilton product and we have guidelines. Let us show you what we are doing. This is what has changed at our hotel, why you want to stay with us, not just because it's a Hilton or whatever it is, but because it's us. And this is what we're doing about making you feel safe about your travels. So and that's,
and to that, understand like this vigilantism that you're talking about, Lauren, a lot of that initially is going to be because some of the things you're implementing don't make sense to a normal person. And I'll give you a perfect example. I had a friend who was out at a racetrack over this past weekend racing, and the hotel he stayed at, He walked in the lobby without a face mask on. The person yelled across the lobby to him, "Sir, you need a face mask. Sir, you need a face mask," and brought him one, which was the right thing. But as he looked to the right to the restaurant, where there were people sitting at the bar, eating separate, but at the bar, no face masks, because you can't eat with a face mask, he immediately was like, well, this makes no sense. I am 8 feet from those people, and you're screaming at me and running at me to give me a face mask, and I have no one around me. This makes no sense. So understand, some of your early reviews are going to be from people who are just annoyed because your specific mix of policies haven't been like really fine-tuned yet, and they make no sense to them, and they annoy them. And so compassion, kindness, thank you for the feedback. This is new to us. We're trying to balance safety with sensibility. All of these things will allow you to look like you care and you're doing something, and kind of make the person who wrote the review look like a crazy, cranky person.
That's right. The best I've ever heard this put was, one of our folks, a guy named Joe Opp, the great Joe Opp, who is long retired from the industry. When we were leading, always used to talk about purpose over process, right? What are you trying to accomplish? And these were for, this was at leading hotels, very, 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 high-end luxury hotels, 5+ star hotels. And obviously, we had a lot of processes for a lot of our hotels. We had a lot of guidelines, but the important part was not the process. The important part was were you attaining your purpose and helping the guest achieve their purpose? Because that's what really separates it. And the process can be a little flexible to make sure that you're actually attaining that purpose. Right? By the way, I just noticed it's 1 o'clock. I'm going to have to bolt here in a moment. It's always a pleasure.
Jason,
I also have to bolt, but I just wanted to close just to follow up on those points. Shout out to the line level employees, right? Who these people that I'm thinking about the most, and that I'm hoping to interview coming up and talk to. I mean, these people, as we know, they don't make a ton of money, right? And they're the ones that lost their jobs and have to come back and have to learn these new processes and have to deal with these guests who are upset or who are leaving negative reviews, and have to learn how to clean the desk, how to hand the key card over without in the most contactless way possible. So I mean, I really feel for them, and I just wanted to close on that and shout out to those people who are coming back to work and learning how to do things differently in our new normal.
I completely agree, and thanks for making us all look like dicks.
Yeah. Hey, Jason, listen, the best compliment I can give you is that you didn't talk near enough, because you became part of the family as soon as you started. Normally we're, let's be polite to the guest co-host, blah, blah. It's like, oh, heck no, he's in the fray. Let's get in here. So, you brought up some great topic discussions, and the fact that we were just fighting to keep the conversation around you, because it was great conversation you brought up. I sincerely appreciate that. And you know that you are always welcome to come back anytime you want to. Love to have you on. I mean, really, honestly, even from today's conversation, has been great. And it's long overdue that we didn't get you on the show for as long as we've kept thinking that you should be. So it's awesome that you're here. For people to find out what you're doing with Hotel Recovery 2020, how to reach out to you, where do they go?
Yeah, so launched CLE content in February, clecontent.com. Got a number of clients. We do content marketing for thought leadership, press releases, webinars, white papers, that type of stuff. In April, we launched Hotel Recovery 2020 website with the top resources for the industry to get back on the road to recovery, really. Part of that is the daily newsletter. We're down to Monday through Thursday now. We took Friday off. Happy Friday, everyone. Really just trying to keep people informed. We're not making any revenue on the site. We do have a couple partners that, help provide us information, and we've got a ton of good contributors that are writing. Any of you guys are welcome to contribute to the site if interested. So thanks for the opportunity to come on, and I will be back for sure. It's been an awesome conversation. Great meeting the folks on the show that I haven't met, and great seeing everyone else.
Thank you, Mr.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you very much. Mr. Tim, where they can find you, sir?
They can find me at timpeter.com. I'm usually Tim Peter on social, but for some reason I am at TC Peter on Twitter, but you can find me at timpeter.com.
And Tim, call me later when you're free. We need to catch up.
Okay, cool. All right. Y'all have a lovely weekend, and I'll see you next week.
Thank you, Mr.
Thanks,
A
Tim.
lot of money this weekend, everybody.
Well, we know that Robert sent out the list late, and Jason walked away with his list, so we can just pick anything out of the hat we want to if there's any residual conversation you'd like to have.
Well,
Question. I do have one question or one topic, and it might be too big to bring up, but I'm going to bring it up in any case. So Dan Waxman, I think a lot of you guys will know him as well.
Post on the show, yeah.
Yeah. He put out a LinkedIn post where he said COVID-19 did not mortally wound TripAdvisor; they did it themselves. TripAdvisor vows their new secret sauce will be returning customers and increased user engagement. And obviously, that's from a Skift article, and he said he had to chuckle about it. That he believes that TripAdvisor was already a dying and wounding animal. We were just talking about reviews then. Obviously, the biggest review site out here is TripAdvisor. And I'd love to know anybody's thoughts on whether TripAdvisor is going to weather COVID-19, pivot and change, or just die, as Dan seems to suggest is going.
So first of all, Google is the biggest review site.
Yeah.
In what terms?
In the most reviews that are most present in the traveler journey, because even before you get to TripAdvisor, if you're searching, you're seeing reviews in Google.
Okay.
And that's one big problem. Second, nothing ever dies in this industry. Okay, so yeah, there are tons of walking zombies, but think of something, even the worst business that serves this industry that has died. It's turned into something that it's still horrible, but nothing ever seems to die in hospitality. So this mentality that things are going to die always makes me chuckle, because I've been around long enough to know nothing ever dies. And then third, yes, I agree with Dan. TripAdvisor has been mortally wounded much longer before COVID because they don't serve anyone. They don't serve the traveler. They don't serve the businesses that are being reviewed. They literally forgot who they serve. And because of that, they've only been serving an attempt to create cash. And that has been the considerable erosion of their position. They were once in a position to completely own travel search. They had more content than anyone else out there, and they stopped serving the traveler and stopped serving anyone else. And literally, it's just anywhere we can make pennies, we want to make pennies, and we're going to shove those in. And that is where their downfall really started.
Mm-hmm. No,
I think.
no,
I was going to say that Stuart had a great podcast, and this goes well back over a year, where he was pointing out the fact that the day that TripAdvisor allowed you to pay to be in the first position is the day that it bastardized its relationship with both parties. As to Ed's point, the customers who now didn't get the truth, and the companies that were struggling hard to make sure they represented themselves well in service quality and content, they basically turned their back on both of them and says, who wants to pay us to get these audiences?
Yep.
And that's where they first started putting their own sense before everybody else. And I think that was the beginning of all. It goes back a lot farther, and their stocks show it too. I mean, they tried to reorganize. They struggled with that. They tried to replay what they were doing for their one-click checks and all this stuff. It was just monetization after a monetization model. And going into this process, TripAdvisor is like, throw a pinch of salt over your shoulder every time you read stuff, because you don't know if it's really because of the ranking that was earned or bought. And then the comments, whether they're contextually correct or whether they're just fed. They have no method policing that really is authenticated as to whether or not it legitimizes the posts that are being put through there. There's no real authentication. There's some policing, but it's already been disproved twice that a lot of times they're allowing comments and contents to go through based on sponsorship relationships. They self-purge stuff off of things that should have been posted but weren't, because the people were paying enough money to have them kind of suppressed. That came out in the news twice this past year. 12-month rolling, not just this year, but 12-month rolling. So they've really discredited their authentication to either market they're serving well before this came through with COVID. I don't, to Ed's point, I don't think they're going to die, but I think their usability is going to be a diminished.
Well, they're going to need to realign, because they actually, I say they don't serve anyone. The one party that they put above any of the other parties that they deal with is how their investors feel about what they're doing.
Oh, massively.
And they do not care about, so anything they do is what will our investors think? Then what do we do? You know, whereas you look at, say what you want about Facebook and some of their missteps, or Google, they're obsessed with the user experience. They're obsessed with making sure people want to spend immense amount of times with them. That is a really difficult position to have, because a lot of times you're looking over easy money over and over and over again. The amount of times I'm sure Facebook probably had plans put in front of them by some junior, private equity group executive who ran a spreadsheet and said, hey, if you just did this, it'd be like $40 billion a quarter to the bottom line. And Facebook went, yeah, but it completely destroys our user base. TripAdvisor has not done that for a long time. They have not put a specific user in front of their desire and desperation for revenue generating schemes.
But the other side to that coin is an unspeakable entity you can't get to, which is Google, that you can't control the relationship of their reviews either. It's very hard to get Google to do anything other than what Google is doing, and there's no place to contact them. I mean, one of the first frustrating things I had when Google Mobile started adding proximity reviews in their mobile application as to your hotel in relationship to points of interest, there was no way I could influence my review value scores on that, because it was a pure Google play of geographically where you're located, geographically where is that located, and is based on the user, which I have no control over knowing the information about. What is the score relevancy of my proximity of their interest to that item to my location itself? So if I get somebody that is all about cultural museums and all that stuff, and I happen to be distant from that compared to my competitor, it takes it out of my rate program. It takes it out of my value proposition program, because they're going to say I'm a 3.2 review for being close to the museum, but my competitor one block over that much closer is a 4.8 because they're closer to the museum. And now I'm being compared on stuff I can't control. Now, to the user, to Ed's point, that to the user experience, that's fine, because that's relevant to my interests. But it may not be relevant to their type of travel, which is what kills me. They may not be able to go to the museum, but I'm rated poorly on proximity to certain items that they're interested in, simply because Google's implying their interest in their particular travel at that time. I know Google's getting better at it, but it's one of those frustrating points that Google, you can't fix stuff.
Yeah, they're by no way perfect. I 100% agree. But honestly, I think if TripAdvisor had held to their initial who they served, I don't think Google would be where they are from a review perspective. Like, I think TripAdvisor's distraction opened the window for Google to become a more prevalent player faster with less effort than had TripAdvisor actually served the traveler consistently throughout their history.
But I think
if TripAdvisor had bought MapQuest, they would have had a chance at kind of being on the same level. I do think that one of the reasons that Google's reviews are so well used, coming from the perspective of somebody who uses them, is because I'm generally looking at a location. It's something we've said for like 20 years, right? Everything's about location. Well, in TripAdvisor, because they do it by the actual like postal code city, that creates problems for certain hotels. And it also creates problems for travelers where something might be 5 miles away from your destination. Maybe you're going to a museum or whatever you may be doing. There may be a hotel within 5 miles that you would have considered, but because it was, according to the post office, in a different city, it doesn't come up ranked in your search. So I think that that's where Google has a huge edge over TripAdvisor. And I think if they want to have any shot against Google specifically, they're going to need to fix that and have more geolocation targeted things where they can quickly adjust and say, okay, here's the top X hotels by traveler rankings within 10 miles of your location search. That would be more meaningful, I think, to travelers than, in the proper city, here are the top 10.
But I think before you even get to that, because I agree with you on that, I think they need to fix the trust issue.
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of two different issues, but I think that, those are the two main areas they'd have to focus on.
I just don't want to run out
Well,
of time.
Tris, did you want to say the thing that you were going to say before Lily?
Well, just super quick. I'm just so I don't think Google is as strong on their reviews as TripAdvisor is from a mindset point of view. The mindset of the user at this point, we've. It's all about training and muscle memory and what we do. And Google does a lot of different things. So it's good at validating during the sales funnel, having those reviews in various points. Whereas TripAdvisor is, I go to TripAdvisor to get a review. Aside from the fact that TripAdvisor does it terribly, and everything that you said, Ed and Lauren and Lily, about how they've tried to monetize it and they've actually forgotten that their core business is a review site, I 100% agree with them. One of the reasons why I brought this up. But I do think it's often a mindset of the user in, and it depends on what type of booking we're talking about here, business, leisure, whatever it's going to be. I think if it's a leisure, I'm certainly thinking from a leisure point of view, I am going to do, that's my last validation check. I go through all of my process. My last validation check is to go to TripAdvisor just to make sure there's not too many negative ratings on there. And I appreciate whether they're bought, the policing and all the rest of it. But I think the general user from a leisure point of view, probably not aware as much as we are in the industry.
That's like saying you're going to a grocery store versus, well, for us over here, going to a grocery store versus going to Walmart. Walmart has a grocery store, but it's also a bunch of other stuff.
Yeah.
You to your point, you go to TripAdvisor, you're looking for a particular thing. And that's where they also fell down. They tried to be outside of that as well. They tried to be a booking channel. They tried to be, and I think Joshua pointed out, they have this local tip and trip stuff. Yeah, that's true. And originally there was some great content that that was user generated. And then it got found out later that there was a lot of inserted stuff from sponsored people that were being put in there and put above other people. Hey, Mr. Ed, you got jump?
Yeah. See you guys later. Have a good weekend.
Flip two. What about Flip two?
Flip.to, Edward St. Ange on social media. Talk to you all soon. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. Bye, Mr. Ed. But not to lose this, but I don't want to lose out on time. One thing I want to go back to something. The difference between Lily and I on something is her revenue perspective and my marketing perspective. We were talking about the business cycle that you were talking about, like this, artificial surge, this revenge travel, and then the drop afterwards, and what to do in the competitive market and rates and stuff forth. From a revenue perspective, Lily is spot on. From a marketing perspective, I look at it, that's when you realign your targeting, because I see it that, yes, you're going to get the revenge traveler initially, the penned up traveler, I don't care, this is a real traveler, the whatever you want to call them, people that are out there just to go out. As soon as they're being told that they're not going to get penalized for this, or they're going to get a fee or something. But then there's other markets afterwards. There's people that have been working through this entire process that are toasted and crispy, and they have yet to take a vacation, and it's only going to ramp back up. And they're going to come into a window of opportunity for their travel to be, all right, hey, Bob, why don't you take a break? You've been busting your butt for 6 months through this stuff. Why don't you take the family and get out of here for a little while? You also have the people that, while they still have the schedule capability, flexibility, and they have enough revenue or savings capability, and they get past that level of safety that they're waiting for in their own personal mind, they're going to go out.
Yeah.
Then you have some corporate travelers that are just like, I got to get in front of this guy. Okay. And if you're telling me if I wear a mask and stay 8 foot away that I can show up in town and talk to you, I'm going to do a little travel. I got to get out in front of my sales. I got to get the business back. So there are other markets that will begin to come into play, whether it's a smooth, they catch it at the bottom of the other one, or whether it's a bounce and it's different places. But there's a progressive market strategy that you can start taking. But Lily's spot on. Large scale conferences and so forth, it's going to be really hard to push people to start showing up in clusters anytime in the immediate future by being months. But there's going to be a whole rolling market segmentation that's going to come into the market after this revenge travel, whatever we want to call it. So I don't disagree with Lily. I think it's going to have its height, and it might have a bit of a dip, but I don't think it's going to be a roller coaster down, back up again. I think it's going to be up, it's going to bounce, and then it's going to bounce again. It's going to, as these different types of market segments come into play.
Yeah, actually, that's exactly kind of what I was saying, Lauren, is that we're going to have the spike and then it's going to go down. But I'm definitely not indicating it's going to go all the way down. We're just going to see a significant lessening of this. Like, we're not going to sell out every beach hotel overnight for 400 rooms, like every weekend for the rest of forever. That's where we're going to see that kind of start to come down.
Mm-hmm.
I'd also like to share that I really hate the term revenge travel.
I know.
That's
Yeah.
why
That's why I threw it in there, but I'm not really a fan of it either.
My hotel.
Ben came up with the other ideas. We absolutely hate.
I like Graycation. I'm loving the Graycation. I'm going with that one.
That's it.
Vacation. Okay.
River shop, that's the Graycation.
The great
Yeah.
question.
Hey, I mean, unless there's other hot topic that we want to hit, we're doing good for time.
No, I think
Anything you
the only other one was the type of people that have really got to get out and stuff like that. There's also the ones that have been cooped up and with family and they want to take the mother-in-law out on holiday and hope to leave her somewhere.
I think that's on the early. I think that's on the early part of the curve.
It really is.
I think if you look at the base of the curve, I think that's probably first out the door.
Absolutely.
I've got to say, Trish has been very brave.
No, she doesn't know how to find the link. I'm okay.
I'll send it to her, buddy.
Okay, Joshua threw something in. BT has been reluctant to travel as offices are staying closed. Business travel, sorry.
Yep.
I think there will be increased demand for third-party locations where customer sales can meet in a safe, clean place. Yeah, I agree with you very much, Joshua. I think there is going to be a lot of pent-up. I got to get in front of my client before I lose them, or before one of my competitors get in front of my client to let them know there's options.
Yeah, and it's funny, Joshua, that you bring up Top Golf because I literally just passed a Top Golf near me, not 24 hours ago, and fully expected people to be out there golfing because, first of all, although they may not have classified, golf was deemed an essential business in the state of Arizona that was not required to close. But second of all, the fact that you've got these bays and Arizona is basically back open for business, whatever. But no, they were still shuttered. So that I don't know.
Do you guys have Top Golf in England at all? I don't even know if it's over there.
I don't think so. But
It's
definitely.
Is it like novelty golf?
when you become millionaires in the next 2 weeks, which I'm sure is going to happen. Head on over to the States. It's golf on steroids. It's my kind of golf because my golf was like Calvin golf, which was use a putter for a driver for a putter, drink lots of beer. That's my golf.
Yes. No, we do have this kind of stuff. There's actually I think it might be a chain down in London called Swingers. And it's basically golf inside a warehouse.
Yes.
It is insane.
Okay.
It was one of the great. Yes, we remember part of the night, definitely. Yes.
Something along those lines. You're basically driving off of a deck, right? And it's divided into bays.
Targets and distance, and
Golf driving range.
while you drink and eat at the same time, which is
But it's an elevated range, Tris, and it's almost like a bowling alley, but for golf.
Yeah. I mean that's such an American thing, isn't it? You actually take the physical exercise out of the game.
Exactly.
That's just a waste of time, okay?
And get straight to the drinking and eating. Wow.
Eating and hitting the ball. Come on.
One day, maybe not on a public webinar, we'll tell you the Alexa story at the end of our golf night. That is honestly one of the funniest stories we have.
That was one hell of a Christmas party. That's all I would say.
That's definitely
back to the 2-2 and waking up and okay.
Yeah, well. Anyway, I'm out of topics, Lauren. Right.
Hey, by the way, before I forget, also Ben, Tris, if I can catch up with you right after the show, I'm just to catch up on some stuff.
I was going to ask you the very same thing, buddy.
Hey! But before we end up all with everything, Lily, obviously your podcast is now internationally famous, and I do have to give you a compliment that you're not the episode that this last episode, but the episode beforehand, you had doubled your following listenership, and I'm hoping the last one that just got posted a few days ago doubles that as well. And then I have another one in the hopper I'm loading up again. It really has been great to see the growth of your audience to it. There are 2 other podcasts. There's my little puny podcast I do after this. Gosh knows I've been lost in the crowd. White noise me. But there's also one with Holly Zoba that does for sales, hospitality sales, that is out there as well. If you would look for hospitality sales podcast, and she does a really nice job of interviewing some really good, talented people, sales-wise as well. So we're trying to cover all the bases with it. But anyway, Lily, if you want to know more about TCRM or Thinks Up Enterprises, where is it they can find you?
They can find us at tcrmservices.com for excellence in all things day-to-day revenue management, and thinkupenterprises.com for consulting, assessment, systems, cleanup, selection, etc. And that's also where the podcast is housed at thinkupenterprises.com. I dropped the link into the comments earlier.
What's your special?
I'm sorry?
What's your special?
Oh, we have a lot of specials going on right now, actually. Thanks for bringing that up, Lauren. We were lucky to receive some PPP funding, so we're trying to give that back to the hospitality community by offsetting the cost of several services. So every Tuesday on the TCRM company page, we're pushing out a deal for something about day-to-day revenue management or oversight, and every Thursday on the ThinkUp page, and this will run through the month of June. Today was the first week. We've got 3 more weeks of them, but each deal is only good for a week. So make sure you follow our company pages if you need anything revenue management or system related, because you can get those for $500 or $600 right now from us.
And Ben and Tris, I mean, we've been quiet about what you've been doing because we don't know what the heck you're doing, but if people want to find them, meet you, and
well, Lauren, what are we doing? What aren't we doing? I think is more to the question. And you can find us at 3and6.agency, where we'll be releasing one of our first blog articles very shortly called "Forget the Low-Hanging Fruit, Pick Up the Stuff on the Damn Ground First," which is all about using your marketing dollars, pounds, euros, yen, or sterling in the smartest way possible.
And to make sure that people can find you, is that a 3 and ampersand and 6? Or
unfortunately, you can't use an ampersand in a URL, which I'd forgotten from my days of creating websites when I was 11. So it's THREEANDSIX.agency. Thanks for a reminder.
Okay, yeah, I'm with you. Right.
I'll make sure it's in the show notes as well for everyone when it comes to being able to track down everybody. And Lil, if you want to back me over the recent current specials or the ones you want us to let us know about next week so that they roll forward, let me know. I'll put them in the show notes as well when I go to distribute all those.
Sorry, I was going to say, if you want to email us direct, it's ben.hanley@3and6.agency and tris.hayward@3and6.agency as well.
Gentlemen, and it's always a pleasure. The fact that our time schedules are a little off so that you spend your time in a different time frame than us. We're starting our middle of our day, and you're concluding your days.
It's 8:00 right now.
So when you drink, when you say, unprecedented times, it really is drinking for unprecedented times.
I am like a pint deep in vodka, so that
wouldn't even affect Lauren at all. He laughs in your face.
Recommending that we just put signs in front of us. So next time we just put little signs up. It's like, there it is.
Absolutely brilliant,
isn't it? It's just my mugshot again, all over.
A little mugshot, yeah. Excellent idea, Josh. We might adopt that for future tense. If you want to see this show or all previous 250 shows, you can go to hospitalitydigitalmarketing.com/live. You'll see the links to all of them, all the way back to 2014. The shows are like this all the time, which is also great. No bloody swearing. Well, that hasn't been working too well in that house, I bet. With that in mind, thank you everyone for joining us both in this chat and also on the other channels and so forth, LinkedIn as well. I've been trying to keep up with your conversations as well. Thank you for those internationally. I think Maria was from Philippines that was in our chat room today, or still is. Thank you for all the different time zone contributions. These all get simulcasted on multiple channels. It will be resent out Wednesdays for EU at noon and also for APAC at noon Sydney time. So if you missed it by chance on the current time zone, because it is an odd hour for you in some of your countries, you can catch it at a more reasonable hour, hopefully, in the middle of the week and do a replay for it as well. So until next Friday, 11:30 Eastern, U.S. time, for show number 252, thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and we see you all next week. Ben and Tris, I'll talk to you real soon.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.